Alright, hello, I'm Sorcerer, and this is my Blizzard Sorcerer guide. So, unsurprisingly, this build uses Blizzard to kill just about everything. But before we get into all the details, I just want to show some demonstration of what is exactly happening here. So, by itself, Blizzard is pretty unimpressive spell. It does some damage over time, the damage is very low, it takes very long time, and it slows stuff, but it's not gonna kill anything really, and it's gonna be miserable. However, there is this one legendary item, the glacial aspect, which makes it spawn ice spikes. And these ice spikes actually deal significant damage. And when you cast a blizzard, it doesn't look all that impressive. There's like this spike here, and there, and there. And you can see that they're spawning all over the place, so if the mob is in the middle, like half of them are gonna miss. But you don't have to cast just one blizzard. You can cast many. And when you do cast many, they all stack. And you get a lot of spikes. Look at them go. And that's how the big damage comes out. You have these 6 skills, and if you look at the other sorcerer build, 4 of them might be very familiar to you. Obviously there's Blizzard. There's then your ever-present 4 defensive skills, Shield for protection, Teleport for mobility, Frost Nova for vulnerable and freeze. And, well, one little extra skill is Ice Blade. It doesn't really do anything, that skill is pretty bad, but it has a cooldown, and when you press a cooldown skill, you get a mana from Prodigy's aspect, so that's why it's here. It's kind of sad, but it is what it is. And for enchantment slots, we have Firebolt, which is also a very common thing for sorcerer builds. It gives you Burning, and Burning is pretty good, or so I've been told. And Teleport. Teleport is just very nice to have. You want to have it in every build, but other builds usually have something important they need here, and this one doesn't, so you just have Teleport. Now you can teleport twice, or if you have boots with max evade charges, you can teleport 5 times. It's just, you know, once you try going full teleport, it's hard to go back. You feel inadequate. And then let's move on to the gear. So for gear, the entire build starts with this aspect. Unlike other builds, you can't just make your fresh character and start playing Blizzard. It just doesn't do anything. You need the spikes from the Blizzard. The spikes deal all the damage. So if you don't have it, there's nothing you can do. And even if you have it, the problem is this aspect gets stronger and stronger, like as the item level up. So you see this 2267 damage. This is on like 840 level item. And if your item is going to be like level 1, it's going to be 8 damage. So this also makes it very awkward to level with this build, because you always need to find this aspect, and you need to have it like level appropriate damage to actually kill the enemies. So in reality, you should level with something else, like for example Ice Shard Sorcerer, because it like has almost the same gear. And then when you get later to tier 3 and tier 4, where you can find sacred and ancestral items, you can find like this one glacial aspect, which is kind of good, and then maybe find it again on ancestral, and then like you're set for a while, so you can properly play the build. Then the second aspect that we use that is not like common in other builds is Frozen Tundra. And well, we don't care about the first part. Deep Freeze summons more spikes. Yeah, we don't even use Deep Freeze. We care about the second part. Your ice spikes have a 50% increased radius. And 50% increased radius means 125% increased area. And that means 125% more chance to hit. Because as I said, they can miss. So this is basically like more than double damage from this one effect. It's mandatory. And then everything else is like pretty common. You see it in many builds. There is Prodigy, which is the only way to get mana, which does not depend on having like multiple enemies to fight. It just works when you press cooldowns, and that's it. Then there is Conceited, which is just free damage, because you always have a barrier on Sorcerer, especially in this build where you have like more barriers than usual. Get to that later. Then Control, another affix that goes in every build just because it gives so much damage. Here it's extra nice because the Blizzard is like freezing automatically. You don't even have to press any skills. Like after 2 seconds, everything's going to be frozen, so you get at least some damage bonus from this. And then you can add more. Then we have this Binding Embers aspect, which adds Immobilize, again, mostly for aspect of control, but also for the Arm Blaze passive. And, well, the mandatory defensive aspect of Disobedience. Not dying is very good, so we include it in our build. And the Stormspell aspect, which people love to hate because it looks so restrictive and specific. 20% damage, only to vulnerable enemies, only when you have a barrier. But it's actually a decent aspect, and that's why it ends up in Amazon Reveal, because it looks like very conditional, but it's 20% damage that you have every time it matters. You always have barrier, as I said earlier, and you don't always have vulnerable, but when you don't have vulnerable, you don't really deal damage. That's the problem with vulnerable. Like in the late game, you stack like 250% of vulnerable damage, and then, yeah, no vulnerable, you deal nothing. Yes, vulnerable, that's when you deal damage, that's when you need the bonus. Well, then our favorite unique chest. It's very nice. Of course, it's not mandatory, but we'll talk about alternatives later. And the Frostblitz aspect, which again brings us back to vulnerable. This thing lets you cast more Frost Novas, so you have more vulnerable, so you deal damage more often. Now, let's move forward. So here is just, again, all the aspects listed in, like some of them you can find in the codex, but of course in the codex they're weak, so you want to find them again with bigger numbers on them. And then, yeah, so this you need to find before you even start the build, and all this you can add a bit later. And another little perk with this aspect is that the number only gets bigger when you upgrade the item. So before you extract it, you should upgrade the thing that you found it on. At least like at the later levels. Maybe at the early levels you don't bother because it's too expensive, but it's definitely like a big boost to your power, and it's not almost free, and you cannot do it later. If you imprint the aspect and then upgrade the item, that's not going to do anything. You need to upgrade before you extract. And another quirk again is that since it scales with item power, you can't really gamble this, or at least you can't gamble a good one until you're like very high level, over 90 or over 95, because the item power of items from the like Obols vendor, it just depends on your level. If you are level 60 or 70, you may be already in tier 4 and you're finding level 800 items or so, but the vendor is going to give you like some 650 crap. So unfortunately, you just have to find this one. Well, there's, of course, a good part of being so dependent on this one aspect is that now you don't care about your weapons. Your weapons can be very low DPS, as long as the stats on them are good, you like them. You don't care about DPS on. Now, enchantments I already talked about, teleport and firebolt, burning is good for your damage, and somewhat for damage reduction. There's a bit of problem with burning in this build because Blizzard itself is a damage over time skill, and Firebolt enchant requires you to do direct damage. So Blizzard doesn't work with it, so you have to use another skill to apply burning. In this case, it's just teleport. You teleport on things and you burn them. But of course, it's like not very convenient, and teleport is not a big area, so yeah, burning is kind of iffy. It's still good, but especially in terms of damage reduction, like you cannot rely on having every mob burning because you can't teleport on every mob. So like don't go very hard on damage reduction from burning enemies. Now I have this entire novel in 3 volumes about how to not run out of mana, because the thing costs a lot of mana. And well, the thing is, there's like a lot of different stuff you can do, but it doesn't help all that much, or doesn't help you in the right situations. Ultimately, you turn to this solution, which is just get gear with good stats. There's cooldown reduction you need to proc Prodigy more often. There's mana cost reduction, and there's resource generation, which only happens on ancestral items. So once you have a lot of these rolls, you just can spam forever pretty much, and it works. And another important tip for mana is to just don't cast Blizzard more than you have to. It stays around for a long time, for 12 seconds, and it deals damage the entire time. So usually you cast it once or twice, the mobs are already dead, they just don't know it, and you don't know it. So you can just stop and wait, or you can just walk away and they will die behind you. Now, here we have progression of how you start from just having glacial aspect and stuff from the Codex of Power, and then how you find your other aspects, and finally the uniques and all the properly rolled items. Well, when you just have Codex, you have pretty much, well, none of the aspects are really that crucial to the build. So this Umbral aspect you can get in the Codex, it can help you with mana early on, but not too much. But well, it's in Champion's Demise, which is a very good farming dungeon, so you might as well do it. And then everything else is just part of the endgame build, but with bad rolls. That's your Codex. Now, this is your starter skill tree again. It's almost the same as the final skill tree, just a few points moved around. So let's go through it top to bottom. There's Firebolt for the enchant. It has 2 ranks because you need 2 before you can move forward in the tree. Then here we have mana passive. Maximum mana is not a very important stat, but it's nice to have it, and there's nothing else here to take. And then we need 1 more point, because 5 is not enough to get to this cluster, so we will do ice shards. Ice shards are sometimes used in like speed farming version of this build, so like this point is not completely wasted. And we have all the defensive skills. Flame Shield with heal, Teleport with damage reduction, Ice Armor with mana regen, pretty standard stuff, and Vulnerable Frost Nova, of course. Like you max Frost Nova because vulnerable time is important, and then you can't afford to put points into anything else. Get Glass Cannon for damage, and Elemental Attunement for sometimes, resets. So Elemental Attunement is again not, like on this build, it's a bit weaker because Blizzard cannot crit, so you can't proc it with Blizzard, so only like your Teleport really can do it, and Ice Blades. So it doesn't proc as much as in other builds, but it's still only 1 point, and sometimes it resets your entire like 10-20 second cooldown skill. So it's nice to have. And we have our mana button. We put 2 points in upgrade, so it reduces its own cooldown, it reduces the cooldown of other skills. So that means more mana. That's what it does here. And then we have the standard defensive passives, the mana shield and protection. Also like go in every build that casts spells for mana. And here's our Blizzard. We take the increased duration upgrade, and we don't put any ranks in it because Blizzard is not going to be dealing any damage. It's all in the spikes. And then the passive. So there's this entire rolled kill cluster in the end of the tree, which we pick all of it. And well, we even pick Frigid Breeze, which is not great because Blizzard Lucky Hit is very, very weak, but it gives some mana. We need mana early on before we have the gear to maintain it, so we take it. And then before this, we have Devouring Blaze, of course, which is just broken, so this is like the main reason why we have Burning in every build in the first place. And we have this extra Chill passive. We only need 2 ranks in it. The 3rd rank doesn't really do anything because of how Blizzard works. Blizzard applies 18% chill per second, is actually 9% chill twice per second. And so with 2 ranks, your 9% turns into like 11 point something. So you can freeze the monsters in 9 ticks of Blizzard. And with 3 ranks, it's still less than 12.5. So you cannot freeze them in 8 ticks. You still need 9 ticks. So it doesn't make any difference at all. And again, for the mana reasons, we run Avalanche. It doesn't proc often, but when it does, it's helpful. And then, yeah, there is nothing really special about gameplay. You just cast Blizzard, teleport on enemies to burn them, Frost Nova to make them vulnerable, and then you use your shield if they try to fight back. And Ice Blades is just, you can press it whenever, or just when you have no mana, or it's pretty much a mana button. Don't think about it. Then the progression here is that you find a bunch of aspects, which are Frost Blitz, which just lets you spam more Frost Novas. And then Binding Embers, which which lets you walk into enemies with flame shield to immobilize them and deal even more damage. Usually it's not necessary, but sometimes you really want to deal a lot of damage, you can do that. Frozen Tundra is basically also just more damage. It works in a weird way, but it just makes you do more damage. And here, like, we assume that you have some mana stats on your gear. So you remove the Frigid Breeze and you remove the Avalanche to get Shatter. And then those extra points go into Icy Veil to have barriers longer and into another elemental attunement to double the chance from 5 to 10% to make it proc a bit more reliably. And that's going to be like your final skill tree. There's nothing really to improve it anymore. The final, of course, change that you do to your build is the Raiment of the Infinite, which is, of course, an amazing item. And there's a reason it's included in every build. You can now pull enemies together and stun them. Stunning them means you get more damage from Aspect of Control. You get all the like damage to stunned enemies bonuses, and you also pull them on top of you, which makes your Shatter passive like a lot stronger because they all now hit each other with explosions. And it also automatically procs your Binding Embers. So when you pull enemies on you while your Flame Shield is active, it counts as walking through them. So they get immobilized. Now there is like this more or less standard damage rotation. You cast Blizzard twice on mobs before you do anything because like you need to stack some blizzards to actually have lots of ice spikes you saw before. And then, like, before they freeze, like, after you cast 2 blizzards, they will freeze in, like, 1 second. Before they freeze, you need to teleport in with Flame Shield to stun and immobilize them, because if you wait too long and they freeze, then there will be no pool. They will stay, like, all over the place. Then you make them vulnerable with Frost Nova, and just spam Blizzard, and they will explode. That's your, like, basic damage rotation, if you really need the damage. If you don't really need the damage, you just cast Blizzard twice and walk. That's what happens in all the like normal dungeons and low tier nightmare dungeons and everything. Now the Paragon board. Here we have 2 of them. One is just for unlucky people and one for when you have Raiment. And they're pretty similar. You start with your, default board. You put Control Glyph into it because it's always active. The Blizzard like automatically chills. Then you move on to the chill board, the Icefall, where you get more damage to like chilled enemies, more damage to chilled enemies, the Frostbite Glyph for more damage to chilled enemies, and this Icefall node, which is not really mandatory, but it's very nice. You like pretty much always kill frozen enemies. You like when you're fighting, you're always gonna have full barrier. In high tier Nightmare Dungeon, full barrier is not enough to save you, but for everything else, it just feels very safe and comfy. Now we move on to Frigid Fate board for vulnerable damage, which goes in every build. Nothing special about it. We put Elementalist Glyph in it because it's actually possible to activate level 1 Elementalist within, so that's like the only one that fits. And we have all 3 damage types in the build. Teleport, Firebolt, and Blizzard, doing cold, fire, lightning damage, so we get full bonus from this one. Then we move on to the Burning Instinct board, because we do use Burning, and it also has the only armor node we have on the entire tree, which is quite important for staying alive. And then this Burning Instinct has a lot of dexterity on it, so we move the Control Glyph from the starter board, and we put Flame Feeder in the starter board as well. And then we add the Searing Heat for crit damage here with the Exploit Glyph. And finally, we take another exit from Burning Instinct to get the Ceaseless Conduit. Ceaseless Conduit just has this one nice rare node with a lot of elite damage and a socket with a lot of dexterity. And pretty much all our glyphs want dexterity. So that's why we do it. We put Tactician here. It doesn't do any, like, we don't have any rare nodes in range even, but it still has additional bonus, which is very nice. And then after you have the basic structure, if you level up your glyphs, you can just add some more points. Like if you level up this one, you get like 3 more willpower points. Same goes for control in Burning Instinct board. Then the exploit also gets a couple more points. And then when you get to Tactician, they start to jump a bit, because Tactician is supposed to be here to give you vulnerable damage. But it can't be here before it's level 15. So once you level Tactician, this board respects a bit to have Dex instead of Int around it. And then this one does the opposite, to have Int instead of Dex for the Elementalist. And then you level Flame Feeder, just a few more points here. And finally you level Elementalist, and then when you level Elementalist, you get less points here because you get some extra free Int, which was out of range before. So you put these extra points to get like more Dex on the Flame Feeder. And that's the board. And then when you do have Raiment, it's pretty much exactly the same. But the only difference is that there is Static Surge. Instead of Ceaseless Conduit, we get Static Surge, and we get it a bit early. It has a lot of damage to stunned enemies, which is very easy to do with Raiment. It has some maximum mana, which is kind of helpful sometimes. And it has Static Surge. Static Surge is another way to get mana. Like, in the end, we don't need it, but like in the early and mid game, it helps a lot. So, and it only takes like 5 points to get it, so we just get it. Every time you teleport to the mobs, you basically get full mana. It's very nice. And then, yeah, it's pretty much this, all the same boards with the same configuration. Like, this one takes more points than Ceaseless Conduit in the previous, so we don't have this in the middle of Burning Instinct, but everything else is pretty much the same. And then here, like this final step, after you level all Lilith to 15, after your gear is good, you can remove the Static Surge and get some damage here. And then the Glyphs, I mentioned them all, but I can also talk about. So this just gives you chill damage, which is always active, and it gives a lot of damage. Same for control. It damage to crowd controlled enemies, and well, chilled enemies are crowd control, and it also has a very strong additional bonus, which is a separate multiplier. Then exploit gives vulnerable and a separate multiplier again. Also pretty self-explanatory. Tactician, just very nice glyph to put into Frigid Fate board, so it gives vulnerable damage and this secondary multiplier. Flame Feeder, well, we do use burning, so, and we do deal direct damage with the ice spikes, so it fits very well. And finally, as I said already, Elementalist is good because we have all 3 elements. And this is an order for you to level them in, like the priority. You get the most out of leveling Frostbite first, and control and exploit. And that is like reflected in this step. They're always ordered in the same way. And well, for hardcore, there is some adjustments you can make to the build. Most importantly, this build doesn't have mandatory second enchantment, so you can just always use Flame Shield to not die when you're killed. And then there's not much else you can change to the build. You just change a bit of your stat priorities on item to go for armor on like amulet, or life on rings, or more damage reduction on your offhand, or stuff like that. And when you are tanky, you can also use the topaz gems instead of ruby, because like the only way you die when you're tanky is by getting like crowd controlled when your flame shield and teleport on cooldown, and that really helps with that. Moving on to the build scaling stat priorities. So the important part of build scaling I already talked about. You need a big number on glacial aspect instead of big number on the weapons. That's what it boils down to. So find your aspect on a high level items with good roll, upgrade the item, then extract the aspect, then put it on your amulet or two-handed weapon in some variant of the build, and you're gonna do high damage. How big the weapon itself doesn't matter. So for stat priorities, they are pretty standard again. You go for vulnerable damage, crit damage, and then for your DPS stats, and then you have always cooldown reduction, resource generation, mana cost reduction to actually be able to cast your spell. That goes pretty much for every slot that can roll this stat, and then for defensive stats, you want armor, you want damage reduction. Well, damage reduction probably for high tier push, you want it against distant enemies because ranged mobs are very dangerous. in most situations, you play this build mostly like melee, so close damage reduction is very good. And damage reduction against burning basically becomes close damage reduction because you only burn enemies when you teleport on them, so it just goes a bit down in the priority compared to other builds. And yeah, that's pretty much it. For mana, there's like a hit chance to regain some % of primary resource. You can get on gloves in the offhand. It helps a little bit, but Blizzard like hit chance is very low, so it's not a priority. Your other stuff usually better. And then since we're using teleport enchant, another important thing to look out for is the implicit roll on the boots. My favorite is maximum evade charges. You can get up to 4 charges of teleport this way, and it makes it very nice. Another alternative is attacks reduce evade cooldown every time you cast Blizzard. It will take off 1 second of your cooldown for every enemy that is hit by the Blizzard. So if you like hit many enemies, it basically instantly resets it. Now we get to the variants, where like how you can adjust the builds to do different things. So the speed farming is kind of one of the places where this build is like at its worst, because the Blizzard is just very long. It takes 12 seconds to get all the damage out. In speed farming, you don't want to wait even 2 seconds. So you want enemies to die instantly, and especially you want to do that in Helltide, because in everything else except Helltide, you can just cast Blizzard once or twice and go forward. And then, well, maybe item drops, you hear the ding, you go back and pick it up. It's a bit annoying, but it doesn't happen every time, so it's fine. But in Helltide, you cannot do it. In Helltide, you have to pick up the cinders, and, well, basically that means you have to stand next to every mob until it dies. And so to fix this problem, we use Ice Shroud Enchant. We already have, like, pretty much all of the stuff to make Ice Shroud work. We have like a bunch of cold passives. We have like all the damage multipliers that are usually in all the builds. We're only missing the aspect of Piercing Cold, which we just use instead of Storm Swell. And then we need the Ice Shard enchant, and we need some points in the Ice Shards. So these points, they come out of Devouring Blaze, because we remove Firebolt enchant for the Ice Shards, because this extra damage is necessary for like speed farming easy content. And then, yeah, that's about it. To make this switch very easy, you can just put Piercing Cold on a glove. Like if you played Ice Shards before, you can just take your Ice Shard gloves. It's going to be perfect. It's going to have ranks to Ice Shards, Piercing Cold, and then if your original glove is Stormspell, you just change one item and you're ready. And then you just play basically Ice Shard build. You teleport into stuff, you press Frost Nova, everything explodes. And then you don't even need to cast Blizzard most of the time, only when you find like a big non-dying elite or some event, big mob, whatever. For Paragon, you can also, like, you can respec entire Paragon board, remove Burning Instinct, because you don't do burning anymore, but it's just too much effort, so I recommend you don't do it. You can change this, like, Flame Feeder Glyph for Destruction to make your Ice Shard stronger, and because you don't have burning anymore, so Flame Feeder doesn't work. That's like easy and free to do. So next come the Nightmare Dungeon push, which is, well, some sort of endgame we have. Is something you do for fun. So here, as you can notice, there's no new items or new skills or anything else. It's just you use exactly the same build, and what changes is just a little bit how you play it. The main reason is that you stay away, you cast Blizzard from far away. And then when you teleport in, you apply all your debuffs, all your crowd controls, and then you immediately teleport back out with your teleport enchant. So that you're never in danger, because in high tiers, you have a lot of damage, you easily can kill enemies, but they can kill you in like 2 hits, and that's if you're tanky and stuck your defense well, otherwise it's 1 hit. I didn't do very much pushing on Blizzard myself. I did some tier 79 dungeon, and you can see it here that I just teleport, press my crowd control, and like normal mobs explode instantly. For elites, it takes a bit longer, like you see those bees. I didn't do this right because I saw the bees late, so I put Blizzard on them, and now they're like off-screen frozen, and soon they will become unstoppable. So when I go in, like the bees are already unstoppable and angry, so I have to run. Then few seconds later, 5 seconds, they are not unstoppable anymore, so I can just cast Blizzard again, cast my stuff, and explode as well. And while playing like this, a bit of, being scared of every shadow, you can do pretty well. And then there is the second version of this build, specifically for Nightmare Dungeon pushing, which is the unique for Sorcerer build, in that it can stay at range all the time. You never have to go melee. And this is something that Blizzard can do. So here we do quite a lot of changes. So let's start with skills. We don't want to be melee, so we remove Frost Nova completely. Instead of Frost Nova, we have Frozen Orb, which can do vulnerable as well. We first freeze enemies with Blizzard, and then shoot one Frozen Orb, they all become vulnerable. And then we also don't have Raiment, we use normal chest. So we don't teleport into enemies. And since we don't want to leave with just freeze as our crowd control, we add Meteor to do immobilize. So with 2 crowd controls, the damage gets decently high. We do lose quite a bit of damage from not having stun. So to get the damage back up, we use a 2-handed staff. And well, if you put Glacial Aspect on a 2-hander, it becomes very strong. It deals a lot of damage and has like another 1.5 multiplier to frozen enemies. The problem with 2-handed stuff is that we now don't have all the mana regen stats on the offhand. We don't have cooldown. So mana becomes quite a bit worse. But since we got a lot of points which were previously in Frost Nova, we just pick up Frigid Breeze again. We pick up Avalanche because we don't have pools anymore, so Shatter is not necessary. And, well, since this takes place of 2 aspects, one of them is Glacial, which goes here, and the other is Stormswell, which we just lose. But we can also now put Control on the necklace. So in total, the damage of this build stays about the same. And then you have very easy gameplay. You just always stay like entire screen away from enemies. You find them, you cast some blizzards to make them freeze. Once they're frozen, you cast Frozen Orb to vulnerable them and Meteor to immobilize them, and you cast more blizzards and like sprinkle another Frozen Orb. And that deals a lot of damage, and you always stay full distance away. You have your shields ready if anything comes at you. You have your teleport to run away, so you can be very safe. And you also have a chest piece instead of raiment, so you have like tons of damage reduction and some armor. It makes you like almost twice as tanky. So this is just very good for like specifically pushing dungeons. It's not going to be very fast, but it's pretty good. And then since we don't use Binding Embers anymore, we don't use Frost Nova anymore, we get new aspects. In this case, it's Exploiter, just for the crowd control duration. This damage to unstoppable enemies doesn't really help. And we have Shared Misery, which is there to just counteract the fact that Meteor is very small, so you can't hit all enemies with Meteor, but you don't want to cast it more than once. You want to spend more time casting Blizzard for damage, so you cast just 1 Meteor, and then the Immobilize spreads to all the enemies that are not hit by it. And then the chest, well, there's not really much you can put on the chest, so I go with Ever Living. It gives you some damage reduction before enemies like are completely frozen while they're just chilled. Another option here is probably the bubble. When you like take damage, you become immortal like for 5 seconds on a 90-second cooldown. Yeah, and Paragon board, it looks very similar to the board that we had without Raiment. Actually, I think it's exactly the same. You just don't have Static Surge, and you have Ceaseless Conduit instead. You have all the same glyphs, all the same board configurations. So if you're tired of always playing a melee mage, this might be the build for you. And finally, the nice and good part of this build, what maybe everybody came here for, is the boss killing, specifically like shitting on Lilith, on Echo of Lilith. And this build is very good at that, because like the biggest weakness of this build is that the damage takes 12 seconds. You need to cast Blizzard for 12 seconds to have full stack of them, and then the damage is completely insane. And on a one large and, well, almost immobile boss, that's pretty easy to do. So here you can do a dirty trick of swapping your items. You first use a set of items to stagger the boss very quickly, and then just before it staggers and all your multipliers kick in, you switch to damage. You go two-hander with aspect of control, and the ring with aspect of retribution, and that makes you deal like 5 times more damage or something. And here, compared to normal build, we just replace one aspect with smiting for crowd control duration, replace Frost Blitz with Exploiter, also for crowd control duration. More crowd control duration means more stagger. And we use Inner Calm instead of Conceited, or instead of Stormswell, because it's just a bit more damage and it's easy to just stand still. Like in normal gameplay, you never stand still, but in this fight specifically, you can. You just only use Teleport. Teleport doesn't break this thing. And you like basically never walk. And then we do some minimal adjustments to skill tree. We remove all the chill magnitude passive and the shield duration passive. We remove the damage reduction because you don't really need it. And then we switch Shatter to Avalanche because we need mana. There's nothing to Shatter. And we get like Conjuration Mastery because there's a couple Ice Blades in the fight, so it's a bit of damage. And then, yeah, we also put Ice Blades in Enchantment slot instead of Teleport because you need them for consistent vulnerable. Because just Frost Nova is not quite doing it. It has like 10-second cooldown, 6-second duration. So you need more. And the Paragon board is, again, very similar to what we had. We removed the Icefall node because well, no enemies are going to die while frozen, except once at the very end of the fight, and we just get like this damaged stuff on the Burning Instinct board. So then, about how to do it, well, first you just spam every spell you can to stagger her faster. Your teleport stuns, your Frost Snow freezes, your Blizzard chills, and your Flame Shield immobilizes, but you need to walk into her or teleport into her for it to proc. And, well, if you do it fast enough, if you have all the crowd control duration aspects, then she will be almost staggered. She'll be almost staggered before she's doing any special attacks, any one-shot moves. So you don't have to worry about them, ideally. And then just before she's staggered, you need to switch your items, like I do here, to deal more damage. And this item switching can sometimes be very tricky. I don't know why, but you click on the item and nothing happens, then you need to just click on it again. And don't do any attacks while you switch items, because that seems to stop it. So just stop attacking, switch items, and continue attacking again. That's the play here. And then if she doesn't move out of it, or your blizzards that are stuck in one place, this can happen to her health bar. And well, even if it doesn't happen, you can also do a second stagger, but then you'll have to play part of the fight normally, dodging her attacks and like flame shielding her one-shot moves. And then you do it all over again in the second phase. Second phase is easier in that sense because she's staggering like almost instantly. So here I just precast all the blizzard, I cast my spells once, and like it's almost there. Like I pretty much have to do the item swap already. And well, then the health bar goes brrr again, and the boss dies. So well, I didn't quite kill her in this attempt. I killed her in some other attempt. But yeah, after you kill her, even if you like go all the way, she doesn't die. She does all these animations with breaking the arena, and you have to dodge this stuff, but it's not that difficult. So I think that's about it for the Blizzard guide. Thank you guys and enjoy.